Welcome and thank you so much for joining us for the 12th episode of YCP's virtual monthly series, Refiner's Fire. Every month, Catholic business leaders from diverse industries share professional and spiritual wisdom in short 30-minute live sessions. In spite of the short length of these segments, we hope the tips and insights will be really powerful for all of us as we work in witness for Christ this year. The name of this micro interview series, Refiner's Fire, actually comes from Scripture, from Malachi chapter 3, verse 2, where we learn that God is, quote, like a refiner's fire, who seeks to purify us and make us the best we can be. And that's the whole point of this series. Through the inspiration and wisdom of these exceptional Catholic leaders, we're challenged to improve in small ways in our professional and spiritual lives. So let's be open to this journey of refinement so that in everything we do it aiming for the higher standard of excellence that gives glory to God. Our topic this month is public speaking. For many of us, standing up and speaking before an audience or anyone at all sounds like a nightmare. Public speaking skills can sometimes come naturally, but often, in fact, I might say always, take practice. St. John Chrysostom was known for his incredible oratory skills. The Greeks even called him Chrysostomos, which means golden mouth. But he needed 12 years of disciplined training to be confident and to get his congregation to sit up and listen. Such skills are a great resume builder, but they're also a great kingdom builder that furthers your ability to work in witness for Christ. And I can't think of a better person to speak on this topic than Gary Schmidt. Gary served as the international president of Toastmasters International in 2009 and 2010. He's been a Toastmaster for 26 years and is currently the county administrator for Clackamas County in Portland-metropolitan area of Oregon. He also has previous experience as a speechwriter and constituent services coordinator for 2 U.S. senators. Welcome, Gary. We're so glad to have you here with us.
Thank you, Peter. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. Well, let's go ahead and jump in. So our audience is pretty used to this now, but you and I will have some time for questions now. And then keep in mind, those watching, that you can ask questions in the chat on YouTube and on Facebook, and we'll get to those in the latter part of our program today. So let's go ahead and dive in, Gary. You've accomplished a lot through public speaking. Can you tell us a little bit about your own journey, how you became so passionate about this topic, and why honing these skills should really matter for us as young Catholic professionals?
Thank you, Peter. So I was strangely drawn to public speaking because I was terrified of public speaking. I am an introvert, and as a young person was incredibly shy. I didn't speak to anyone, my family, through church, at school. I just was terrified to speak. And I actually made it through most of my public education without speaking ever in class. Even though I take speech classes through college, I just didn't talk. And I finally, after graduating college, realized I have to do something because the ability to communicate is so very important just to survive in our lives, in our world. So I joined an organization called Toastmasters International. That changed my life. And just very quickly, Toastmasters, it's a worldwide nonprofit educational organization, almost 100 years old now, across the world, not just the United States. And it helps teach women and men how to be confident communicators and leaders as well. So I joined Toastmasters because I was so afraid, and it took me 5 different mentions from other people to join. I ignored them the entire time. Finally, a friend of mine drugged me to a Toastmasters club. And I was intrigued. I was scared, but I was intrigued that I got to do this to help improve my skills. And I joined Toastmasters, changed my life, gave me confidence, practice in public speaking. And now I love speaking. I'm still an introvert. That doesn't mean I'm not a good speaker, or that those of us who are introverts are not good speakers. We just learn and have different styles of energy. So really, Toastmasters was my opening to a different world, a better world of effective communication. And as children of God, we are unique. There is no one on this entire planet like us, and therefore we must share our message with others. And therefore, it's so imperative to learn effective public communication techniques and ultimately the confidence to be able to speak publicly and to speak well.
Such a good point, Gary. I mean, a number of good points, but it is important for us to just state up front that just because you like being in front of people or get your energy from being in large groups of people doesn't mean that you're going to be good at public speaking. And it doesn't mean that if you don't get your energy from there, that you're absolutely doomed to never be able to communicate clearly one-on-one, small group, or in a large group setting. So it's good that we start off laying that framework. So what are some practical tips that you've developed to really hone this public speaking skill set? What are the do's and don'ts of public speaking? Some starting points for us.
Exactly. And again, I've been a member of Toastmasters for 26 years, and I've learned and grown as a communicator. So I'll just share you 2 minutes worth of the top tips. And really, I divide it into 3 sections. First is before you even speak, preparing. Second is while and during as you're speaking. And third is after you speak. So first, before you speak, really understand who you're speaking to, why you're speaking, what purpose do you have as a speaker, really to analyze exactly what your role is and what you are intending to do as a speaker. For example, I give a speech on public speaking techniques, and I change the format based on the audience I'm speaking to. If I'm speaking to high school kids, it's a much different message than if I'm speaking to retirees. Same content, but my stories are different, and I tailor it to that audience. So understand whom you're speaking to. Second, the actual moment that you're speaking, and there's 3 subsets of that. It's really important to organize your remarks, not just to speak haphazardly or randomly, because you'll confuse the audience. So focus. What is it you're trying to say? And say it in 2 or 3 main points. Focus and organize your remarks. Second, gestures. It's different now that we're all remote, but you can still use gestures remotely. I'm doing it right now. So using body movement, facial expressions, and gestures while you speak, that helps enhance your message. And then your vocal variety, your voice. Don't speak in a monotone voice at the same rate, the same tone. You'll bore your audience. So you want to vary your voice, talk a little bit louder, a little bit softer, use the emotion of your voice. And then finally, after you speak, be gracious and be grateful. Thank whomever you invited to speak for the opportunity to speak. Even if it's your boss at work, say thank you for allowing me to do that presentation. Be gracious and be grateful and learn. None of us are perfect. I'm certainly not. You may make mistakes or make errors. That's okay. Learn from it and do better next time. So that's a real short version of some quick public speaking tips that I've learned through my time in Toastmasters.
That's terrific, Gary. There's a lot to unpack there, but it's a great starting place. I mean, just knowing your audience is so important. It can allow a great message to fall completely flat if you don't really understand your audience. And I also, I know personally, always try and keep in mind that brevity is key, and that people rarely say, "Oh, I wish that had gone on longer," after you've been speaking. So it's good for us to keep in mind to get to the point. Well, let's keep on here with our questions. So studies continuously list public speaking as people's number one fear, but we know from faith that perfect love casts out all fear, and to have no anxiety at all, but to have everything, make your requests known to God. So these are right from Scripture. Why do you think it's the number one fear, and how can our Catholic faith help us overcome this fear to really become exceptional communicators, ultimately for God's glory?
Yes, and it is true. Fear of public speaking is the number one fear of everyone in the world. And the number 2 fear, it changes, but it's between death and snakes. So, but public speaking is the number 1 fear. And I believe it goes back to when we're young and in school and primary school or junior high school. That's around the age we're asked to give a speech in school. And as young people, we're just learning and growing and trying to figure out where we fit in this world. And we're so vulnerable to criticism. And we're worried that if someone snickers or laughs, then it's going to impact our whole world. And I believe at that young age is where most of us gain this belief that I can never speak in public. I will be terrified. I will make a mistake. People will laugh. People will judge me. And it all goes back to God, right? And it's about really faith, having faith that, as I mentioned, or knowing God created each of us uniquely. There is no one in the entire world just like us. We have to share our message, our lives, our stories with others. And we have to have faith that not only will God be with us and help us to have the courage and the confidence to deliver those messages, but that we can also take our own responsibility and learn to grow that confidence and skill in effective public speaking. For me, it was through Toastmasters. You could find another method or another path. Toastmasters is not the only way. I think it's one of the better ways, but there's many ways through education, reading, taking seminars, just practice. But putting yourself out there, having faith and confidence in yourself and the abilities that God gave you to share your message with the world. We owe it to the world. We owe it to God to be able to share our messages and not live in fear or fear of giving an effective presentation. Just putting ourselves out there and doing it.
Exactly. I know often people will cite, I think it's loosely said to be St. Francis, I believe, who says, speak the gospel or live the gospel and use words when necessary, right? And so I think sometimes we fall on that kind of as something we can stand behind and say, well, I'm trying to live the gospel, but I'm not really at a point where I need to use words, right? But it's important that we realize that words do have such meaning and can carry such force, and as a persuasive communication method are so critical. And when we're sharing the faith, we are sometimes going to be asked to use words, and we should be prepared to use words and speak them in a really compelling way. At YCP, we talk about knowing our faith and living our faith, right? Being prepared to communicate it. But first we have to understand our faith as well and keep studying it and asking for the inspiration that comes from God to understand his word and his guidance in our life. So let's keep on with this faith theme. I can see how public speaking can actually involve a number of virtues. Humility, because you realize your message is for others and not about me. Courage, because you have to be bold and take a chance. Generosity, because you have to give of yourself and share an authentic message. Can you talk a little bit about public speaking in this light and how it can actually be something that helps us to cultivate a life of heroic virtue?
Yes, absolutely. And to me, as a speaker, it is really about others. It's not about ourselves. And that's another way actually of eliminating nervousness, is realizing it's not about us. Get out of our heads. Get out of your own head. It's all about how can I help serve others through the spoken word and through the message I am delivering to others. And to me, that's also part of Jesus and the servant leadership that he embodied throughout his entire life. And I will equate that to speaking as well. We are serving others, being of service to others by sharing a message that maybe only we have, that others need to hear. And again, we owe it to the world and God and others to share that message with others. So yes, it is always asking as a speaker, what is in the best interest of my audience? What do my audience need to hear? What is of value to them? How can my message help inspire or motivate or deliver something that someone else needs to hear at this moment in time? Even if you're giving a work presentation on the budget, you are still delivering a message that other people need to hear. It may not be inspiring or motivational, but it's informative. It's helping progress your career and the company and the place you work. So it's all about what's in it for the audience. And as a speaker, to always keep that in mind. And it also helps you because you get that negativity out of your head about internalizing to yourself and rather focusing entirely, how can you help others, serve others through your spoken word?
Absolutely. I'm just thinking about YCP events and the chance to hone your speaking ability there. Let's say you come to our executive speaker series or a networking happy hour. People, the first question you're going to get asked is, what do you do? Right? So how can you use that as a chance to hone your own 30-second pitch on what you do, regardless of whether it seems exciting or inspiring or not? You can kind of play with that and use that setting to try it out, because you'll probably get asked that 3, 5, 10 times. So there's little ways that we can kind of build on these virtues, right? Put ourselves in situations where we can cultivate that and cultivate the public speaking skill itself. There's a lot more opportunity, I think, to learn to communicate clearly and concisely than we may realize at first glance.
Absolutely.
So coming up on our last question here, and I do want to remind our audience, we're going to turn to questions in a second from you. So you can be chatting, typing that into the chat on whichever platform you're watching, and we'll choose from those for questions for Gary. So what's something that you've noticed in young professionals in terms of their public speaking skills? And what would some advice be to those of us who want to advance in our careers, especially in light of this topic?
Yes, excellent question. I will offer the ability to communicate orally in person will always be present. That will never go away. Even with the pandemic, most of us have gone to remote communications. While that is a tool we use to communicate, great tool, we will always still have the need for face-to-face communication. That will never, ever totally disappear. And I will say also, younger people in particular, although it's all ages, they are tied to these electronic devices, phones, texting, emailing, social mediaizing. I made that word up. But that is one form of communication, but it still doesn't beat the face-to-face communication. So my advice is accept that, understand that the ability to communicate includes face-to-face, giving an oral presentation, a verbal presentation, speaking with others. The tools to do it have changed, whether it's online or remotely, but in person will still be important and effective. Just quickly, going remote. A lot of us, especially older folks like me, we didn't really do a lot of remote meetings. It was all in person. And now in about a year and a half, we've all learned how to use these remote tools. And I picked that up as quick as possible, just like all the rest of us. Toastmasters helped me, but also I just learned it through trial and error. Just very quickly, as I'm speaking to you, I'm looking at my camera, so it gives the appearance I'm looking at all of you in the eye. I'm not looking at Peter, which I'm doing right now. See, my eye line has changed, but I'm looking at the camera, even though I'm talking to Peter and all of you. That's just a very small thing, but do you know how many people don't do that today? Like 90% of people don't look at the camera when they talk on a remote meeting. Drives me crazy. So little tips like that. So as a professional, look at the camera when you're speaking, when you're online. It will make a world of difference. I cannot tell you. So just little things like that. The tools we use will change over time. There are tools that haven't even been invented yet that someday we'll use to communicate. But the ability to use your voice, your body, your mind to deliver powerful messages will never, ever change, regardless of the tools we use. So that is my advice to professionals of any age, but especially our young Catholic professionals.
Excellent. Thank you, Gary. So we're going to turn to questions here from our audience. So we'll put our first question up here from Jessica. What's the best way to practice removing filters or fillers such as like, etc. from your speech?
Great question, and most of us do them. I still do them too. I work really hard to eliminate them, but all of us do them, yet we want to minimize them or, if possible, eliminate them as much as possible because they are incredibly distracting, as you if you hear someone constantly use those filler words. For me in Toastmasters, that's where I come from, so I share this. We have a role called grammarian within the Toastmasters Club. And that person within the club, they listen very intently to everyone who speaks, and they give you a tally of how many times you said and other fillers. And when that report comes out, boy, is it embarrassing when you heard, Gary, you had 45 ahs during your 5-minute speech. And at that point, you learn to hear it because you go, wow, I had no idea. Therefore, you become a very conscious listener, and then you learn to slowly eliminate them. And the secret is you pause. The secret is to pause like that. Instead of subconsciously, our minds want to constantly fill the silence. Therefore, we use the ahs and ums. The answer is to pause, and it takes practice to have that pause and not be terrified with the silence.
That silence, accepting silence is very tough. I read once that I think maybe Abraham Lincoln, if I recall, he would stand up in front of the podium and there would be silence, and he would take 15, 20, 30 seconds, and your audience is just leaning forward in their chairs. They're just like waiting on the edge of their seats. But the pause is so powerful. You hear speechwriters talk about that and speakers, professional speakers.
Absolutely.
I assume we could also ask our boss or maybe a coworker, somehow give me a sign or tell me when I'm using these filler words so I can start to be more aware of them. So there's other ways that we can probably identify if this is a struggle for us and when and how we can improve it.
Absolutely. Quickly, if you're in a comfortable group where you trust each other, you could use an actual audible device like a bell or a little chime and do it in a safe practice environment. Anytime you say an ah or someone rings a bell or gives a chime, and then you right there on the spot realize, wow, I just did that. And that helps you understand you're using them and then help eliminate.
Great tactic. Let's go on to the next question from our audience. From Allie. How did you become a speechwriter? Is it easier to write for yourself, a speech you're giving, versus a speech you're writing for someone else to say?
Excellent question. I became a speechwriter because my bosses in the United States Senate where I worked knew I was in Toastmasters. And they said, well, you write speeches. You must be somewhat good at it. Why don't you start writing speeches for the senator? And I said, okay, I'll give it a try. And I did. And I did okay. And I then became a speechwriter for 2 of the U.S. senators I worked for. It is easier to write your own speech, of course, because when you're writing a speech for someone else, you are writing in their voice, not yours. Which is why as a speechwriter, it's so important to me. You really want to know, how does that person speak? What is their tone, their tenor, their style? And you learn that by simply listening to them talk. For me, I would literally shadow my senator, and I worked for them and I knew them. I'd shadow them for a day or two, just listening to how they talk on the phone, in a meeting, giving a speech. And that helped me when I would write speeches for them. Because as a speechwriter, you're writing for the other person, not for yourself. Although you learn general techniques as a speaker, what works, organization, as I mentioned, stories and anecdotes that help spread and enhance your message. But it is easier to write for yourself than for someone else.
Excellent. Thank you for the question, Ali. Go on to the next question here from Augustine. What are your recommendations outside of Toastmasters? Any books, video series, other resources you might recommend for us, Gary?
Oh, there are, yes, a lot. Certainly books, and I'm going to forget them all, but Dale Carnegie, he wrote books 100 years ago that are still very, very powerful today. How to Stop Worrying and Start Living is a great book. He also wrote a book on public speaking. Norman Vincent Peale, for that matter, he writes about the power of positive thinking, but also addresses effective communication and how you calm your nerves as a speaker. John Maxwell, I feel, is an incredible leadership author. He's written a lot of books about leadership, but that also encompasses speaking and how you communicate with others. There's just a ton of good books. You could just Google good speaking books anywhere and you find a great list of topics. There's another one geared for people who want to become professional speakers called Speak and Grow Rich, which I just love because it just gives you general techniques on effective speaking outside of starting your own speaking business. And then as well, just training sessions, seminars you could take at your local community college or college, whether you're a student or not, online seminars. There's just so many different options out there. So certainly great opportunities outside of Toastmasters, although I have to say it, consider Toastmasters an incredible opportunity for anyone all around the world.
So Gary, real quickly, Toastmasters, what is that like if someone wants to get involved? Is there like a local chapter? Is there online resources? Maybe real quickly, what does that look like if someone says, yes, I want to go get started with them?
Absolutely. The website is toastmasters.org, toastmasters.org. You can check out everything about the organization. We have Toastmaster clubs in 165 countries all around the world. They meet every day of the week, every time of the day. Usually it's 1 hour once a week. Over 17,000 Toastmasters clubs, every state in the U.S. So go to toastmasters.org. You could go to find a club section, find a club that's near you, just go visit. Most clubs are still online for Toastmasters, so it's an online experience for now. But just check it out, see what you think. Dues, are you ready? About $100 a year. That's it. It's pretty economical to be a member of Toastmasters. I highly, highly recommend it. It's changed my life, and everyone I know who's been a member, it's only been a positive influence for them.
Very compelling argument for getting involved with Toastmasters. Well, let's take another question here from our audience. From Sophia, how do you recover the trust of your audience when you lose your place or thoughts or things otherwise don't go as planned?
Another great question. So first of all, I will say, when you make a mistake as a speaker, and you will, and I do, don't ever draw attention to it, because 95% of the time, the audience has no idea you made a mistake. They have no idea. You just keep on going. Don't draw attention to it by saying, oh my gosh, I just lost my place. I'm so sorry. The audience doesn't know that. You know that. Don't draw attention to it. Just keep going. Unless it's an obvious blunder, like the projector falls off the table. Well, in that case, you can make a joke about it because the audience all knows it happened, and then you move on and you keep on going. But if you do lose your place, just stop, pause. We talked about the pause. It's important to take a pause, just stop. And if you can, go back to in your mind where you're at. It's okay to use notes, so refer to your notes and then get back on track. If you've totally zoned out, own it. Say, everyone, I got to say, I kind of lost where I was at. Where you all think I was at? Or what do you think I should be bringing up next in my speech? Make it audience participation. Have some fun with it. Remember, the audience, they're afraid of speaking too. And they're so thrilled that it's you speaking and not them. They want to see you succeed. I'm being a bit funny there, but it's true. The audience wants you to succeed. So do not stress out to yourself if you feel you've made a mistake. Keep on going. If you've made a crucial error, then draw attention to it. Add some humor if you can, but just keep on going. Again, servant leadership. You are giving to others. They're very forgiving. Audiences are forgiving. They're rooting for you and they want you to succeed. So just keep on going, learn from it, and then do better next time.
Thanks for the question, Sophia. So Gary, as we wrap up our time here, what's one key takeaway you hope our audience has today from our conversation?
Outside of joining Toastmasters, it would be that God created each of us as a unique person, the only person like us in the world. Share your message with the world and do whatever it takes for you to become a confident communicator so you may share that message with the world. You owe it to the world and you owe it to God.
Amen.